up in Fayette County, Indiana, and that was down, I want to say, now, you probably have never heard of it, but there's a little creek called Saints Creek, and Mom and Dad owned a property that crossed Saints Creek. It was up a large hill. At the top of that hill is where we had the house and the barn. I had to milk the cows for quite a time. I was still in school. I was probably 15, maybe 14 or 15, milking cows after dark, before it got daylight of a morning. And that was really a hard time to go. When one of my brothers, they always trapped during the winter times, and for one morning, the twins, I don't know what the problem was, but I had to replace them and run the traps. So the unfortunate thing about me running the traps was that I had to walk up a little hill to look into a hole where they had the traps. When I looked into that hole, a skunk let me have it. And Mom, when I got back to the house, Mom put me in a round tub and scrubbed on me, and still didn't get the smell off. But the thing of it was, I had to go to school. Mom said, "You're going to go to school whether or no." And so she had put me in a tub and scrubbed me real hard, you know. And I went to school, and when they had their first class, the principal was called in my teacher called the principal and wanted him to come down and see what he could smell, see if he smelled it real bad. And so they decided that they'd put me in the little room off to the side, and I'd sit in there all by myself, and I'd eat my dinner when it come dinner time, and that was the lonesomest time I've had in my life, period. I played on the softball team. I was the pitcher and catcher on the softball team. When the pitcher was pitching, I'd be the catcher, and when I was pitching, he'd be the catcher.
Okay.
So that's the way that went.
Was this for?
This was Orange High School. I had got a little message one night in my senior year that Uncle Sam wanted me, and I had to go to took people that were eligible to go to the service, and we got a nice little message while I was a senior in my final year of school. And they said, well, they would wait on me till I graduated so I could be inducted into the service. And so that was in 1944. 1944, I went into the service. I done my training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and Fort Hood, Texas. We were stopped at Fort Bragg. And the thing about that was I spent about, I'm going to say 9 to 10 months overseas, and the war was still going on, World War II. And so we left France and came across the ocean back to the United States. We had a 10-day delay en route, which we could visit with anybody we wanted and go home and visit with them. So I went home and visited with Mom and Dad, and they were not in very good health at that time. And I said, "Mom, is there anything I can do to help you?" And she said, "Yes, Junie." So I always call me Junie. Would you try to see if you can help maybe get out of the service and come as a dependent discharge? I said, well, if I knew what to do, and they said, well, we'll tell you what maybe you should do. You should go to the fellow in Connorsville that deals with all the people going into the service and coming out. So I did, And he said, I don't know whether I can get you out or not, but he said, I'll try. Well, about 2 or 3 days, I got the word that I could get a discharge and be working at home as a dependent. Now, it didn't take as long as you would think, but I'm going to say it was probably within a week or maybe a week and a half. And Mom and Dad were so tickled because I had 2 other brothers that were in, and they both served overseas, but not in the same project. One was Melvin was a kind of an engineer, built bridges and roads and so forth. And Harold was a weather forecaster, one of the best he was. I had to go to, because I wasn't feeling right, and they decided I had to, and when you have the mumps, you can't be be around the public. You had to be in one area. While I was in that, I was really feeling bad because I couldn't go on with my regular crew. I'd already been there with them for 13 weeks training. And they stopped me right there because I had to be isolated with the mumps. And so while I was in the mumps, having the mumps, I was so depressed. And I happened to be sitting in the barracks, just doing nothing because I was so depressed. And so it just so happened, and I think the Lord took it that way, or somebody did. A fella comes through the barracks taking volunteers for the paratroopers. Well, I was so depressed, I said, yes, I'll sign up to go, not knowing what I was getting into. So that led me into the paratroopers, not right at the time, but I signed up for it. And that's where I took my paratroopers training, was in Georgia. No more than got the paratroopers training in, then they got the word that we're going to be going to overseas. And they said they wouldn't tell us where we were going overseas. We never knew where we were going until after we got there. And the part of that was that we went over on a nice ship. I think it was the Queen Mary, that's right. And so we were started back after we got the word that, well, I'm a little ahead. We got word one day while we were recouping in France that we were going to have to be jumping the next morning. They gave us time, but it might have been a day or two, but it was really quick, that we were going to jump the Rhine River at 4 in the morning, which is still dark. That would be the only way that we could survive at all, if it had to be dark. So we went to bed and none of us could sleep. We just worried and worried and worried. We got the word that General Patton had been lost nobody had lost contact with General Patton. And come to find out that, and later, that Patton had got the place where the river we were supposed to jump over, he'd already got that secured. It was, I guess you could say it was, he got his job done and
pushed the
Germans back. Originally, we were going to jump the Rhine River, and consequently, we'd run their people into the river. And about 1:30 in the morning, a guy come through the barracks and said, "It's called off. It's called off. You don't have to jump." And we were all just so thrilled, but none of us got to sleep the rest of that night. So it was in about I bet 3 or 4 days we had to get ready to depart for San Francisco, but we'd stop in the United States for a 10-day delay en route. Well, that 10-day en route is when I asked to be discharged so I could help Mom and Dad, and it was approved. We got the word, we were happy that we didn't have to go jump. But in the meantime, they had made arrangements for us to go to Japan, but they gave us a 10-day delay en route, and and then we'd meet in San Francisco, and then we'd go on over to the fighting zone. Well, that's when I was telling you about a while ago that I got Mom and Dad wanted me to help see if I could keep them farming, and we put it in for it, and it was approved, and so I had to go back to Fort Benjamin Harrison, and I had to go there, and it took the biggest part of a day, and they filled out my discharge and honorable discharge, but I did have 1 day AOL. The thing of it was, we went to Fort Bragg, and the reason for that was that my best friend, which lived here, or was from Rushville, was taking charge. So he was supposed to be the night watchman or whatever it was, and he had to sign me out and sign me in, but I didn't sign out there because I was on delay en route. And when I got there, I was about 3 minutes late. I was supposed to be there before, or at midnight or before, and I was 3 minutes late. So he was on duty that night, and of course he didn't want to get in trouble if somebody else knew that I was late. So he had to make out a thing that I was 3 minutes late, and made that statement, and it's on my discharge yet today. We went to a football game, and she was sitting way up here in the stands. Rushville was playing somebody in football, and Opal was sitting way up here, and it started raining. Bernice, my sister, was there.
It's her fault.
And it's her fault. She said that she saw me coming, and I don't know where she was sitting in the stands, but boy, she was sitting, I guess, with Opal, wasn't she, or close to you. Anyhow, there's Junie, my brother, Junie. And so I got to say hi to her and everything, and it come time to go home. The football game was just, I think it was not over or was over. So I asked her if I could take her home, and she said, well, I can't. I'd have to, my mother won't let me. Take me home. And so I think Opal called her mother and asked her, well, anyhow, I got to take her home. And when I took her home, I let her out at the home. She never gave me a kiss or anything. She'd run to that door at the house, and that was it. And I said, well, I probably won't meet her no more. But when I left her and she went up and run to the house, that was my thoughts. I'll never see her no more. And I still don't know what I'd done to get back with her then. We got married in Arlington, Indiana, at the Christian Church there in Arlington, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And goodness, when we got married, we had about 2 or 3 people that the first thing we heard was they'll never make it. It'll never stand. So consequently, it's lasted 70 years. I have no regrets. Well, at the railroad, I worked as a laborer to start with, and as I was a laborer, what we done, we when I first started, they had cattle cars coming in, the double deck cars for cattle, and my job and another guy's job was to clean the bad stuff that the cattle had happened in there. So I spent several days doing that, and then they asked me if I could do carpenter work, and I said, "Oh, I don't see why not." So I jumped from, I think it was 90-some cents an hour to $1.20-some an hour by going to that job, which I accepted.
Now, was that a pretty good pay increase back then?
That was a big increase, and didn't see it in the check. Opal could see it, but I spent, I don't know how many years as a carpenter. They didn't call it a carpenter there. They had a different name for it. Carmen, I guess, right. And my job was, me and 3 others, we put floors in boxcars. The floors the lumber we used were that thick. Was 3 1/4 inches wide, or 4 3/4, I think it was. 2 men in each end of the boxcar is when I was working that way. And I worked for a long time in that department. And some way I had met somebody that had little authority or whatever, and talked with them and was good friends with them or whatever. And I asked him, "Don't you never get any chance to be a little better, come up in class?" And this guy he happened to be assistant superintendent, and I didn't know it. He said, "Les," he said, "Can you call you Les?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to try to see if I can't get you a little better job." And it was about a week later. I thought I done gave up, but about a week later, maybe longer, I got the word to come to the office. I thought, "Oh boy, I'm in trouble now. I've done something wrong." And that was the time in which they said, "Lester, we're going to offer you or take you on another job as a supervisor." I said, "Supervisor?" They said, "Yes, you'll have to work with another fellow for a few days, but we want you to get learn some of the things that you need to learn." And so I got that job, but the job I had at my last days there was inspecting the welders, seeing that they could do a good job. I'd never been around welding, and I was supposed to inspect and make sure that they were doing a good job. So when I got that job, a few days after I got that, I asked one of the best welders on the job. I said, "How do I know whether you're doing a good job or not? I never was around welding." He says, and we did get to be friends before that, but he said, "I'll help you." He said, "I'll make sure it's done right." So that was all right. I got to be a supervisor there, and of course I had to inspect their work and so forth. They were getting ready to shut down part of the factory by orders of the government or whatever. And so I thought, "Oh boy, this is going to be bad." They said, "Well, you'll probably be one of the first ones that we have to lay off." And I thought, "Oh, that is bad." They offered me a job in Pennsylvania, and either that or take severance pay. Well, we had 4 kids, and I couldn't see me going up there and working and then staying here, and we couldn't afford to have them up there in Pennsylvania, so I took severance pay. Oh, I think it was maybe $300 or $400. I don't remember how much, but that was it. And they'd put my name on any book or any sheet of paper that would, if I was looking for another job, that would say they'd give me a good recommendation, and so I liked that part. But I stayed there, and about 3 weeks after that, I was gone. I didn't have a job. I found a place that was making walk-in freezers, and I got a job there as a laborer, using a tool, because the foam that they made the walk-in freezers had a lot of stuff coming out of where they put the foam on, and it's sometimes all over the side. My job to use a tool that's flat enough that you could scrape the stuff off it. So I worked there. I don't know, I think I got laid off there, and I got a job of being going around for this one company, checking for leaks in roofs and stuff. And I didn't like that job, but I had it. And of course, I always carried, I had a truck, and I was always carrying a double ladder that you could put together. And I had to get up on that roof. And honestly, I was not scared until after I got ready to come down from that roof. But anyhow, I could not find a leak. Any flat roof that has water on it, or can have water from rain and so forth, is almost impossible to find a leak, because the water will run a long ways before it comes down. So I told them that I had to go out there, and that's what I was reading. Just mentioned that I had to go out there. And I came, of course, I put it there and back on my truck and went back in and reported to a guy that was my boss. And I told him, I said, I just couldn't find a real leak. I mean, you know, I could see where it was leaking in the roof, but I couldn't tell on the roof because it's a flat roof. You can't tell on a flat roof. Well, he said, you've done the best you could. Don't worry about it. I said, I'll go over and talk to him about it. So I didn't hear any more about that. And then I think it was just about that time, I don't know what year it was, but I think when I got done, I hadn't done a whole lot there, but I got to work that was the word that the Beech Grove shops were going back to work. So I went back there and worked until they really shut down. It was, my early days, I was with one of the youngest of 7 children, and I always got all the leftovers, so I dressed in blue, raggedy blue. About the only thing we got in those days was candy. Mom and Dad would buy a pound of hard candy that was already made for sale, and us kids would get into that candy and eat it all the first day. Like in Christmas Day, it would be gone by evening, and so we had to start on something else. But that was my early days. Now, whatever I got at Christmas time, I got it because the twins ahead of me had wore them out. Like clothing, they had almost wore the clothing out, but I had to finish it. Yes. Hand-me-downs, that was my one of the best things I got, I guess. And of course, Mom and Dad would always buy that hard candy every Christmas.